We're going to continue with discrete random variables. We have our table that we've been working with. There's two more aspects of the table that we're going to be finding. One is our expected value, and the expected value is the same thing as the mean. So if we're trying to find the average or mean, that means the exact same thing as the expected value. The other thing that we're going to find is the standard deviation. With both of these, what we have is a formula. In order to find our expected value or mean, what we do is we take our x value times the probability. And when we're looking at a table, we have our x value and the probability. So in this case, the x value is 1, the probability is 0.3. We do that for each of the different x values and probabilities, and then we add them all up, and that gives us our mean. With the standard deviation, what we do is we take our x value minus the mean. So what we need to do in order to find the standard deviation is first find the mean. Then we square the x value in the mean and times it by its probability. We do that for each of the different parts of the discrete random variable. And that right there, after we find the standard deviation, after we find the square root, gives us our standard deviation. So let's look at example 1. First thing that we need to do is we need to figure out what our x value is. Remember, all the tables add up to 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to add up the 0.3 plus the 0.35 plus the 0.25, and that gives us 0.9. So that means that this has to be 0.1 because 0.1 plus 0.9 gives us 1. So that would be our first answer. Now our second answer would be greater than or equal to 2. That means that it includes 2 and it includes 3. So when we add that up, that gives us 0.6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come to our mean and we're going to come to our standard deviation. So with the mean, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our x value and we're going to times it by its probability. Then we take the next x value and times it by its probability. We take the next x value, we times it by its probability. And then we take our last x value and times it by its probability. We add up all those values and hopefully you have your calculator out. I just put it straight into the calculator and I get the answer 1.75. That means on average, anybody that comes to the party eats about 1.75 pieces of pizza. Now, obviously nobody does that, but that tells us what the average is. Now, looking at letter D, what we're going to do is we're going to find the standard deviation. Now, with the standard deviation, once again, I'm using my calculator. To set it up, I have 0 minus the mean, 1.75 squared, and I times it by its probability, which in this case is 0.1. And I do it for the next one. I go 1 minus 1.75, square it, I times it by its probability. Then I take the next one, which is 2 minus 1.75, square it, I times it by its probability. Then I take my last one. I subtract it from the mean, I square it, I times it by its probability. I'm going to take this long equation, I'm going to plug it into my calculator, and I get the answer 0.942. Let's look at example 2. I'm going to do the same thing as the last one. What I'm going to do is add up each of my probabilities, 0.78, 0.1, 0.03, and 0.01. And that gives me 0.92. So I know that all of these probabilities have to add up to 1. So that means that underneath 2 would be So that gives me my first answer. Now for my second answer, I'm trying to find 0 or 1. So if I'm looking at this, 0 or 1, I add both of those up, and I get 0.88. Now for the mean and standard deviation. For the mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my x value, I'm going to times it by the probability. I'm going to take my next x value, I'm going to times it by the probability. Take my next x value, I'm going to times it by its probability. I'm going to take the next x value, I'm going to times it by its probability. And then I'm going to take the last x value and times it by its probability. Once again, I'm using my calculator in order to solve this. I'm plugging in each of the values. And when I do that, what I get is 0.39. So that means that on the average person gets about 0.39 targets. Obviously, nobody gets 0.39, but that's what the average is for all the classes. Now let's look at the standard deviation. We're going to take the square root. Then we're going to take our first x value, which is 0. I'm going to subtract it from the mean. I'm going to square it and times it by the probability. Then I'm going to take the next x value. I'm going to subtract it from the mean. I'm going to square it, and then I'm going to times it by the next probability, by its probability. I take the next x value. I'm going to subtract it from the mean. I'm going to square it, and I'm going to times it by its probability. I'm going to take the next x value. I'm going to subtract it from the mean. I'm going to square it, and I'm going to times it by its probability. And then I'm going to take the last x value, subtract it from the mean, square it, and times it by its probability. Once again, I'm using the calculator for this whole process. So when I plug it into the calculator, I get the answer 0.83.